Hello, everyone. Welcome to one more podcast of the Athletic School podcast. Today, our guest speaker is Mitch Van Beek. He's the founder of the Movement Pain Free program, where he helps people break free from pain exercise, stay injury free, and achieve the results they want. Mitchell, thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
So, tell us a little bit what's the movement based training and how is that different from what we think about exercise, lifting weights, and stuff?
Yeah. So, when it comes to training, I like to think of the body like a car. So, you drive your car, you can go in forward or you can go in reverse. So, that's the two functions of the car, and our body's very similar.
Mm-hmm.
So, our body can move forward through space, and that's where our walking, our running, our direction change come in, or we can move backwards or lift things. So our body has a movement function and a lifting function. So movement based training would just be centered around building strength, building speed, building longevity around our movement function rather than our lifting function.
So, would you say the training you're focusing more on the way that we move? Is that why you are not lifting weights?
Yeah, and I actually had someone the other day say that I'm basing this off of something arbitrary, something that's kind of made up, but it's not really true. The movement based training ideology is based around the study of how we walk, how we run, how we crawl when we're babies. It's all based around human locomotion and the best way for us to use our body to do that. So, yeah, it's completely centered around human movement and the way that we can get strong and stay injury and pain free while doing that.
Mm-hmm. And so, why would someone uh, pick a movement based training instead of going to the gym and just lifting weights like everyone else, kind of?
Yeah, so the main idea is everything we do is movement based.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the sports beside lifting sports are movement based. When you're going throughout your day, pretty much everything you do, you need to move through space other than picking things up, which is about, I like to say it's the 99% versus the 1%. So if you're moving 99% of the time, lifting things 1% of the time, I personally think that your training should probably match that ratio. So that's why I think everyone should choose a movement based approach to their exercise because it just matches your life a lot better.
Mm-hmm. And tell me a little bit more about your story because I think a lot of people will relate to what happened to you. But I'm sure there was a turning point where you're like, okay, this is not working anymore. Going to the gym and doing, I don't know, a chest press or squats or something like that just doesn't work anymore. So tell me how you came up with the movement training.
Yeah, so this kind of dates back to when I was like 10 years old. I was the kid who couldn't jump on the trampoline because my back hurt when I did it. And I just have a very vivid memory of that. And I struggled with back pain for as long as I could remember before I started doing what I do. And what I realize now is that back pain was arising from negative inputs that I was giving myself, and it didn't start from lifting based training. I will say that it really started. I'm from Iowa, and if you know anything about Iowa, it's a wrestling state. So
Hmm.
I've wrestled since I was probably 3 years old, and a big part of wrestling is actually kind of duck feet, hip thrusting, lifting movements, bracing your core. A lot of things that aren't super useful for the movement side of things, super useful for wrestling though. So my nervous system from an early age was getting negative inputs when it came to my everyday life. And those inputs really ratcheted up when I started lifting weights in the traditional manner. And those negative inputs are usually the duck feed with heel pressure, the hip thrusting actions that compress our lower back, and then the core bracing elements of traditional training where we're teaching the spine to not move. We're teaching the spine to freeze under load. And those inputs changed how I was walking, changed how I was running, and eventually I continued to have pain until I was about 23, 20. I'll say 22 when I eventually got out of back pain. But so that was kind of my story. I just struggled with exercise related pain or movement related pain for a long time,
Mhm.
and thought I was doing all the right things. I had seen a lot of physical therapists. I had done all the lifting, all the types of lifting. Even I had done powerlifting, I had done Olympic lifting, I had done just everything that I thought I could do, but I was missing the mark just a little bit.
Hmm. And so, how did you get rid of your back pain? It was through the movement training.
Yeah. And this worked for me, and this works with the people that I help as well. The the basic idea is if you're in pain, something is going wrong with how energy is being transferred through your body, and we call that movement. So if we can get you moving back within your body's design, or if I could get myself moving back within my body's design, then my body would be able to heal and stop giving those pain signals. So that's exactly what I did. I started with slow motion movement assessment. So looked at how I was moving
Hmm.
and figured out the places where energy just wasn't flowing very well through my body, where it was getting stuck. And then I made a plan. I had a lot of help along the way, but made a plan to unstick that those energy points in my body and just start moving more fluidly, more efficiently. And eventually my body was able to heal itself by just getting out of a stress state from chronic damage. And yeah, that's pretty much the overarching idea is if you change how you move, you'll change how you feel.
That's good. I would like to try to bring it to more easy terms to understand for some people. Maybe there is a soccer player, a basketball player that I don't know, they have pain on their knees or something like that, or their elbow hurts. Um, what are some things that they should be looking at? Should they looking at their posture when they are moving, when they are playing, or both? What are some things that they can do in order to like, okay, maybe this is wrong, that's why I probably have all this pain I'm having right now.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about knee pain just
Mhm.
as an example because it's really it's simple to talk through those concepts. So the knee is just a hinge joint. It has a little bit of rotation, obviously, as it gets into those deeper ranges, but the knee's a hinge, and above and below it, it has two three-dimensional joints. So your hip is a ball and socket, a true ball and socket, and then your ankle is kind of an improvised ball and socket.
Mhm.
And so the knee should be protected by the organization of the ankle and the hip, but a lot of things can happen that'll throw our ankle and our hip off and not allow them to move together. And if the ankle and the hip just aren't working together very well, then that hinge joint between them is what's going to take the brunt of the force, and knee pain shows up. So the biggest thing that's going to stop the organization of your hip and your ankle is going to be foot collapse or heel pressure.
Mhm.
And that's really the biggest thing that we see. People have knee pain, they probably have some degree of foot collapse or duck footedness, or their heel is just trying to strike the ground when they're walking, when they're running, when they're jumping. So that's the biggest thing when it comes to knee pain is we need to make sure that the foot is a very strong platform for everything to move above.
Mhm.
And then we can work on organizing the hip and the ankle above that foot to protect the knee. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Yeah, it does. So basically, our body it's fully connected. Am I right?
Yeah.
So if something is not working properly, um, that doesn't mean that that specific part of your body is gonna feel pain, but it's probably gonna make other parts of your body to to say like, look, there's something going on here, guys. Please stop what you're doing because there's something wrong.
Yeah.
Um, so if you're not lifting weights, what are you doing? What's the training that you are doing? Because I feel like when people like think about going to the gym and like they have their own sport, but then like, okay, now we're gonna go work out. Um, I think people don't even have the knowledge and the mindset that like there's nothing else for me to do at the gym besides lifting weights. So what are some things that you're doing at the gym?
Yeah. So this is where it gets kind of not black and white because I'm still doing the traditional movements. So I'm still hinging, I'm still squatting, still
Hmm.
pressing and rowing. The the big keys are how we're doing them.
Hmm.
So in a traditional lifting setting, if you're going to do a squat, you are going to push through your heels, you're going to open your hips as you descend. You're going to close them as you ascend. So as you move up, you're going to hip thrust to get your hips back under the bar at the top. And a lot of coaches teach a lot of breathing techniques to stop the core from moving. So that would be a traditional squat. But with a movement based squat, we're going to pressure the forefoot. We're going to make sure that the hips are actually resisting rotation as we go down. So I always just talk about keeping your kneecaps pointed straight forward
Hmm.
because that'll just allow everything to lengthen properly. And then we're not going to be holding our breath to brace the core. We're actually going to be setting our shoulders in a very specific way to create a lot of tension along that backside of the body. And that's what will protect your spine. We want the muscles to do the work. We don't want to be filling our body cavity with air to
Hmm.
stop things from moving. We want the muscles to keep things in place and maintain alignment. So I'm still doing all of the normal exercises per se.
Hmm.
It's just there's a movement based spin on them so that they're useful for walking, running, jumping, not just useful for lifting a ton of weight off the ground or squatting up and down with it.
And besides pain, what's some other results and outcomes that people get when they are doing? Let's say they are doing the traditional squat. You know, what are some of the things that can happen to them when they're doing the traditional squat, and what are some of the things that they do? What are some of the results that they get when they're doing like a movement based squat? Do they get stronger in a way, or is it like is it just focus on like not getting injured and not having any type of pain?
Yeah. Yeah. So a big piece of this is the fewer injuries that you have, the longer you can train
Mhm.
without a setback. So, just as a function of not having pain and not getting injured, you're going to get more results anyway. But another side of it is the more efficiently you can use your body, the better your results are going to be from a performance standpoint. So, I just had a client, he he does a lot of physical testing for his job, and initially when they tested out his vertical, it was like 31 inches, and then we worked together for 6 months, and he started using his body a lot more efficiently, and his vertical hopped up to 37.
Mhm.
Just and it I won't say he got like a ton stronger because I know that he was a very strong lifter before this,
Mhm.
and strength is kind of like a loose term here, but he just is using his body much more efficiently. So his feet are a lot springier, his hips are being used the way they're designed, and his spine is transferring energy up and down a lot more efficiently. So he can move his body farther with a single effort, he can move his body more efficiently forward. So, yeah, just the results are your lifting numbers probably won't go up, because we can still load this stuff heavy, 200, 300, 400 pounds, but you're never going to be able to out power lift the 1,000 pound squatters. But your body is going to thank you for being more efficiently used, and yeah, your performance is definitely going to go up just as a function of that fluid movement, of that efficiency and in using your body.
Yeah, and I think that's the main thing for people that are listening to us. It's like, and the mission with the athletic school is to improve performance, you know. And sometimes we go to the gym and then we like, oh yeah, I'm lifting more now, but like that doesn't mean anything, right? Like for us athletes, uh, can I throw the football? Can I release the football quicker? Can I throw it further? You know what I mean? Like lifting more doesn't mean anything, like, and I think that's where people get confused because they think if they're doing like they're working out their biceps and they're lifting more, they're going to be able to throw it harder, but like that doesn't mean anything. And I think people get confused because performance and aesthetics, the way that you look, it's totally completely different things, you know. Just because you look strong doesn't mean that you are strong at all.
I
So yeah, and you know, trying to, I think that the main focus for me and the athletic school is to open people's mind, you know, in a way that they can think for themselves. Um, and having you here, it's already breaking a myth that people have, that they think that they have to go to the gym in order to get stronger, and they have to be doing this and that exercise to get better. What are some other things that you see people thinking that it's probably wrong? What are some myths that we can break?
Yeah, the biggest myth I would say is if you're a strong lifter, you're going to be a strong mover,
Hmm.
because to a point that is probably true. I mean, increasing the amount of force that you can produce is going to make you faster. It's going to make you jump higher to a point. But if you are doing this stuff to the point where it hijacks how you're moving, so it causes your feet to collapse, it gets you stuck in a hip thrust position, or your spine just becomes a frozen piece of your body, your your performance is going to start to plummet at a point. So the biggest piece of that is your strength needs to serve your movement function, and the biggest way to do that is to become aware of the things that you need to do to move well. And that's really the biggest pieces that we're talking about is we need our feet to function the right way. We
Hmm.
need our hips to be controlled, and we need our spine to actually be super mobile so that it can transfer energy from one side of our body to the other. And you just used the throwing a football example. Yeah, if your back squat increases to a point, you're probably going to increase your throwing distance. But if you back squat yourself into a place where now your spine is having trouble transferring energy, that throwing motion, which is a transfer from this side to that side, is going to suffer if you now get stuck here. So, yeah, that's the biggest myth I think that needs to be torn down is being a strong lifter and being a strong mover are not the same thing, and there's definitely a point where they become opposites too.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think I think it's not pretty to talk about injuries and pain. Like it probably doesn't get as many likes as it should. Um, but if you look at the athletes, the successful athletes of all time, the main thing that they have is that they don't get injuries just as much. And I'll bring a soccer example here. Um, you see Cristiano Ronaldo, Messi, those guys. Um, they, of course, they had their injuries just because they are high performance athletes. But then you look at Neymar, which I love him with all my heart, from Brazil and everything. Like, he's our guy, he's our hope. But at the same time, he's always and always injured, and he can help us because he's always injured. And it's it becoming a question now, like, is he really gonna come back and play? Because last time he came back and then he played 2 games and then he got injured again. You know what I mean? So I think people have to remember that, like, look, you can only get better if you're not injured.
Yep.
And I read Tom Brady's book, and he doesn't necessarily talk about the movement, but he's against lifting a little bit. And people always talked how, he didn't have a lot of muscles, he was kind of slow and all of that. Well, he got the job done, greatest of all time, a bunch of rings. And his main thing was, like, he used to exercise with bands, just simple bands, um, drink a lot of water, nutrition, and that was it. And he was able to throw a football 100 times more than the other guys because they were tired, because they had to go to the gym and they were lifting weights, and, like, now their arms cannot throw a football anymore, while his was just throwing more and more and more and just getting better and better. So I think it's important for people that are listening to us to understand that, like, if you're not injured, you are already, like, ahead. You can be ahead if you really want to. Um, so yeah, I think that's a very good important thing to say. Um, One of the things that I saw on your videos, especially when you're talking about the your foot position, and you talk about the duck foot, like, a lot of the videos, your feet are kind of like going inward a little bit, or like straight more than usual. Why is that? Is that something that everyone should be watching?
Yeah. So with the foot positioning, I usually cue it to be outside edge of the foot straight, and that'll look like your feet are a little turned in just because your big toes do go inward a little bit from your foot.
Yeah.
But the entire idea behind that is when we start running, if your foot is used to being outside edge straight, then you rotate into that foot, your foot can lock into place from that inside to outside torque,
Hmm.
and then the rest of your body can just push you forward on top of it. So you'll see people whose feet are turned out when they run, so their foot is like 45 degrees from their midline. Their hip has to open a lot more to find that tension to push off of, because really your foot is always just trying to lock into place and then push you forward.
Hmm.
So if we teach our feet, our nervous system, to use our feet in a way that gets us to lock them into place earlier, then our hip and our spine can just do their job a lot more efficiently. There's less of a slack moment between the touchdown and the push off.
And how do we teach our foot to do that? Is it just becoming aware when you are, maybe walking or doing a easy jog or something like that? Because, and I'll say, as a soccer player, like, I don't have time to look at my foot when I'm running. You know what I
Yep.
mean? But I can do that at the gym when I'm in the treadmill. I can try to look at those things. Is that the right way to go?
So you're exactly right. You don't have time to think about this when
Yeah.
you're doing it, which I agree. That's why we need to train a specific way when we can think about it. So when we're doing our squats, when we're doing our hinges, when we're doing anything where it's a pretty slow and controlled action compared to what we do on the field or in our everyday life, that's when we need to be thinking about it and be aware of it. And then, yeah, when you get on the field, hopefully, and this does happen, your nervous system is now trained to do those things you've been focusing on. So yes, it's a big awareness thing when you can think about it. So when you're standing, you can think about that, get your feet set up, and then you'll be fine. When you're walking, it's you can think about it, but you shouldn't have to. And then when you're running, you just can't think about it. It doesn't happen. So when we're in the gym, everything we do should be that correct foot setup. So outside edge straight, and then actually the other cue is to tear the ground apart. It's like you're digging your feet down and away. It's like you're digging them into sand. And that's that lateral stability that we need to create. And then if you pick up one foot, this foot's going to push you over to the other side. And that's the whole idea is when we're moving, you're not pushing yourself forward, you're pushing yourself from this foot to that foot. So it's actually like a 45-degree angle with each step. If you're walking straight, if you're making a lateral cut, it's going to be a little bit of a different angle, but everything we're doing is training the feet to work together, push from one of them to the other. So yeah, that's really the idea about it or behind it. And yeah, like you said, don't think about it while you're doing it. Think
Mhm.
about it when you can focus on it in the gym.
Yeah. Um, what's one simple tip, maybe one exercise that every athlete should be doing, if there is one?
Yeah. So every exercise is useful,
Hmm.
but the biggest thing that makes an exercise non-athletic to me is the hip thrusting action. And
What do you mean by that?
yeah, and I'll explain that just by talking about what we do when we're moving. So if you would thrust your hips forward with every step, your walk would look really funny, and you would have to unthrust your hip. You would have to get your hips back again in order to move. So to me, the biggest negative of traditional training is the hip thrust action because it just it maximally shortens your glutes, and you're just going to have to get unhip thrusted to do anything again. So that's my biggest tip. And if like you don't have to change much about your training, but if you stop hip thrusting at the top of things, then your training is going to be a lot more useful for your movement just because your glutes stay longer during the whole exercise. And obviously there are exercises that are just literally hip thrusts, like a glute bridge or like a barbell hip thrust. You can just take those out and do other things. So that's really my biggest tip is just take the hip thrust out of training and you're already ahead of a lot of people.
Hmm. And I was thinking about body mass and muscles, right? And you talk about wrestling. Some sports, you do have to be kind of big and you have to have some muscles in order to also protect your bones in a way. Um, can you achieve the same amount of body mass doing a movement training instead of the traditional training that we are used to?
Yeah, I definitely believe that you can. I'm training a kid who's going to play D2 football right now, and he's had no issues putting on and keeping on mass. He's upper 260s right now, and obviously got to keep putting on weight to play football at a high level. But when it comes to putting on mass, all you need to do is stress the muscle at length. So if you if you're using your muscles, you're getting them, you're lengthening them under load, then your body's going to adapt by creating longer muscles, which adds mass to the muscle, and it'll adapt by creating thicker muscles. So yeah, the the mass gaining aspect of it is all the same. We're just doing it in a way that doesn't mess with how we move too. So that the concepts stay the same. I use a ton of resources from lifting coaches, like traditional lifting coaches, power lifters, all those people. I take their ideas on mass and I just put the movement spin on it so
Mhm.
that we're gaining mass and staying a good mover at the same time. So yeah, it all stays the same.
Gotcha. Okay. Um, one last question that I always ask the guest speakers. It's one thing you would share with the entire world, something, a message that it's gonna reach every single person in the on Earth. What would you say? And it doesn't have to be related to what we're talking about, but it can. So it's up to you. What would you say?
Yeah, the biggest thing I've learned on this journey that I've been on with training and health is that everything you do matters. And if one piece is lacking, it's going to affect everything else. So you could do 10 things right. And if the 11th thing that you do wrong is just canceling out those 10 right things, then that's probably the thing that you need to focus on. So everything that you do matters. And when it comes to training, we're building strength, right? Whether we're doing lifting or movement, but we need to make sure that every piece of our body is doing the right thing so that we aren't canceling out all the hard work that we are doing. So everything matters.
And I'm just interested in how did you learn that? Was there a point in your life that you were doing a little bit of everything, but then you were missing out on something, and then that affected other things?
Yeah. So at my peak athleticism, we'll say I was playing college football. I could deadlift 500 pounds. I could squat 500 pounds, but my feet were super weak. And I thought, I'll just start doing more foot isolation exercises. So
Mhm.
you'll see people doing like ISOs with their heel up and whatnot. And like that's a great place to start, but your foot needs to be organized with your ankle and your hip. So if you're just keeping all these things separate, it's not going to come together the way that you think it will. So that's where I really learned like everything you do matters. So how you squat needs to be in a way that helps you run better, and it really affects every exercise. Uh, Even like with bench press, if you're bench pressing and pushing through your heels, your body's learning from that because everything you do matters. So next time you go to push someone and you push through your heels and then you get knocked back because you're on your heels and you're stuck, then yeah, that's because that's what you taught your body to do. So those were the lessons I learned from.
Yeah, that's crazy. I never thought about how much our body is connected, even when we're doing bench press. But it does make a lot of sense. Um, Mitch, thanks so much for joining me and sharing a little bit about what you do. Like I said to you before, this is something that I'm very interested. I think more people needs to learn about it, and not necessarily to start doing it, but at least to start questioning. Because I think it's like we just go to the gym and then we lift weights and we still have all this pain and like can we not notice that something is wrong? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And especially with social media nowadays, we see so many different things, and we pick and choose on what we wanted to believe or what makes us more comfortable. And and I think it's much easier to go to the gym and like, well, yeah, let me just lift weight real quick here because like everyone is doing it, because everyone is doing it. Like, I don't want to do this training that is cheaper than everyone, and now people are looking at me weird, like, what the hell is this guy doing? Why does he feel look like that, or whatever it is? So I think, I hope that people that are listening to us can at least question some of the methods that they are using it, and just start opening their mind. And if everything works out for the best, they come to you and like they start learning from people like you on how to truly move. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate you having me on, and yeah, it was a great conversation, man.